So thanks everyone for joining us. My name is John. I am on the ScreenSteps team, and today we are going to be talking about beating the knowledge management challenge, how to build a business case for a knowledge management initiative in your contact center. It's going to be a great session. We have Greg DeVore, CEO of ScreenSteps with us, and Vicki Brackett, the Chief Knowledge Officer at Knowledgely. So it's going to be a great session. I am going to be your moderator, so I will be manning the chat and the Q&A. If you have any questions, pop them in the Q&A. I will either save them for the end or rudely interrupt Vicki and Greg as they go through the session and get it in time. But I encourage you also to use the chat and interact with those here, and we'll go from there.
Well, and Vicki, do you want to take just a moment and introduce yourself? I'm one of the co-founders of ScreenSteps, but tell people a little bit about what you do and why you're positioned to really give us some good insights here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. I've been a CX leader in the executive chair for over 2 decades, mostly doing turnarounds. 60% of my career has been in BPO. 40% has been in internal brands in the contact center space. I got into knowledge management a couple of years ago because I really feel like I've spent millions and millions of dollars on workarounds in my organizations through the years. And this particular type of systems, these systems can really help really make a better employee experience and customer experience while also reducing costs and increasing productivity and mitigating risk. So that's why I'm so passionate about this. But my perspective is from a CX leader.
Fantastic. Well, great. All right. Well, let's jump into it. So if we look here, as we look at challenges around knowledge management, these are all symptoms of what's going on and questions people have about knowledge management. Employees are overwhelmed during training. There's so much information coming at them. And if you look, especially in the contact center, AI is taking care of a lot of the low-hanging fruit, and the things that they're left with are much more complex. And so there's a lot to learn there. Supervisors are swamped handling escalations. So what's an escalation? It's when they don't know what to do. The agent doesn't know what to do. They have to call a supervisor, or they have to put somebody on hold and talk to their coworker. I have heard numbers anywhere between 25% to 80% of calls getting escalated in the contact center, and my Siri's talking to me. But supervisors are swamped when they're trying to handle this. And you create, to compensate for this, you create all of these complex structures just to help. You've got escalation desks and all sorts of things that cost a lot of money. And then the big question everybody's having also is, where does AI fit into this knowledge operations strategy? How is it going to negate the need for knowledge management, or how's it going to all fit in? And so Vicki's going to present to us here how to really look at the details of this problem so you really understand what's going on and what the costs are involved.
So as CX leaders, we're masters of the workarounds, right? We just make it happen every day. But these workarounds to help agents find the answer in seconds, or the processes just aren't there. And so we do these costly workarounds. The first one that Greg talked about was the supervisors. Some people even do what I call the merry-go-round, where supervisors take turns, and it really takes them away from the job that they have of inspiring and motivating and coaching agents. It turns them into sort of the help desk. Then we've got our different supports. So some will just say, just transfer to tier 2 if you don't know the answer. That's what they tell the agents, can't find it. Or sometimes we're giving them the fish instead of teaching them how to fish. So they just start transferring everything. And finally, the CX leader comes in, or the contact center manager, and says, no, you have to do these X amount of things before you transfer. All this costs money. Extended nesting. I can't tell you how many times they've asked me to extend nesting because agents weren't ready for the operations floor. Extra retraining. The call to WFM, taking your low performers off the phone to help them in these little tiny groups so you don't jeopardize the queue. And then, of course, we've got the proverbial, SME teams with the team leaders and the QA and the operations managers. This is a very costly workaround to try to help an agent find the answer quickly. And then we've got the team chats, the Slack, the MS Teams, and to Greg's point, their agents are putting their callers on hold to help another agent. All of this costs money. And If you're an internal brand, your BPOs are having the same problem. So whether you're being billed by the minute, by the hour, by the FTE, by the transaction, you're paying for the BPO's agents to hurry and try to get some help to find that answer. And BPOs, that's unproductive time. You cannot bill for that. And you know that to be true. So it really cuts into your margins. So let's talk about AI.
Yeah, so the big question is, well, how does AI play in all this? Can't AI solve all these problems? Just, we just flip a switch and it goes. AI, and to a certain degree, has some promises that don't match reality. So I've heard companies come in and say, hey, we can just take AI and we can throw it at all your chats and your conversations and all your information, and it'll figure it all out. But that's kind of like giving AI your junk drawer of knowledge and just say, hey, figure out what's right here. And if your own internal people don't know that, AI is not going to know it either. AI needs to be fed knowledge. And when AI is fed accurate knowledge, it can be really helpful. When it's fed inaccurate knowledge, it can be really problematic. So when you get AI that doesn't have a good underpinning of knowledge, it's like this super helpful employee who doesn't know anything. They're anxious to give you an answer, but they're going to give you the wrong one. So what you see is you have organizations that want to adopt AI, but they don't have the underlying knowledge resources, that knowledge discipline to really feed that AI accurate and useful information. So as we look at this, you don't just need a knowledge management tool, you need a knowledge operations system. If you're working in the contact center, things are constantly changing. Your needs are changing. It may be a new product, a new problem, a new team, a new situation. If you're just thinking in like, I'm just going to buy this tool, it's going to solve my problem, it's not going to work. You need a system that's going to allow you to identify what knowledge you need, capture it in a way that is findable, followable, and scannable, and keep it up to date, iterate as you need. So what does a system consist of? Well, a system has to have an owner. You have to have somebody in the organization that owns this knowledge operation system. It needs to consist of a tool or maybe multiple tools, that you're specialized tools for doing this. It's not a matter of, hey, we're just going to do this all with Word documents and PowerPoint files. That's not going to meet the needs here. But you also need a process. And so some people assume, well, if we just buy the tool, that'll solve our problems. You need a strategy in how you're going to tie all these things together. So you have to have the owner, a tool or multiple tools, and a process for doing this.
So let's talk a little bit about the questions that your leadership team are going to have you answer as you want to try to implement a new system, a new operation system in your organization. How many FTEs will this require? What's the cost? What's the time to value? When are we going to see a positive change in the contact center results, the KPIs? And when can we recoup the costs of a project like this? So how many FTEs will this cost you? Well, you just repurpose existing FTEs as knowledge champions. So they're already doing the work, or they're fixing mistakes, or they're doing damage control. And you know what that's like? It's, oh my gosh, we've got a problem. This is wrong. The emails start flying around. You try to update some article. You've got an intranet message, and it just causes more questions with the agents. So you already have these people that are doing the work. You just have to repurpose your FTEs. We do this every day at Knowledgely to help companies do this, because this is a simple part to be able to figure this out.
Well, and to that point, Vicki, I say when I talk to companies about this, they're concerned like, well, who's going to do all this? And like you said, they're doing it right now, but I said, well, we want to turn these people from knowledge spenders to knowledge investors. When they are just jumping in and putting out fires and answering questions, they're knowledge spenders. They're going to answer that question today, and they're going to answer that question again tomorrow. When they become a knowledge investor and they're investing in that knowledge operation system, they're going to answer that question once, and that's going to answer that question now 1,000 or 1,000,000 times. And so we're making their efforts much more effective. It's not a matter of we need more FTEs. We've got to make their time more impactful and more of an investment.
Great point.
Now, when you think about the tool, a lot of people think like they think, oh, we just need a knowledge base, and it's just really a content management system. If it has a search bar up there and we can publish something, then that's all we need. The reality is, in the majority of contact centers, you're dealing with high complexity and high change. And so you need a tool that is fast to capture that complexity and keep up with that change, and that can also help communicate that complexity. So if there's a complex situation, will the tool help you design something that is findable and followable and scannable by that agent so they can find it in 5 seconds? They can follow it without having to turn to a supervisor, and they can scan it while they're on the call without having to put the caller on hold. If it can't do that, then your knowledge operations plan is not going to be successful because you can't keep up with the changes or you can't communicate the complexity. So when you're evaluating tools, you got to say, how fast will this help us create and iterate on knowledge? And how easy will it be for us to communicate complex procedures or scenarios to our agents? Now, when you look at what makes a knowledge management initiative a success, there's lots of parts to it. It is not something where we just turn on something and it magically works. There's various aspects. There's the implementation, the time to value. Instead of thinking of it like we're going to be done, it's how quickly do we get value and productivity. Vicki, do you want to talk about a little bit about these and how you see them?
Sure. We've got a client right now that's a global client. And what we're doing is we're starting with the key call drivers and each of the 5 channels that their agents use to determine when we're going to be able to basically launch and be able to be and see some type of positive impact to the KPIs. That could be 50% of the knowledge, it could be 60% or more. That's what we're finding out right now. But the importance of doing it this way operationally is that you're going to have some quick wins that you can communicate upstairs to the executive team to rally the support behind your initiative.
Yeah. So, when you're looking at this, when you're building your business case, you've got to identify, the current costs that you've got, but the executive's going to want to see this. They want to say, okay, what's this going to cost in terms of FTE? And do you have a plan that I believe in? Like, is this a plausible plan for success? And when you go in there and you say, okay, well, we're going to take 3 months or 6 months and we're going to get it all done, that's a bit of a naive approach because your knowledge is constantly changing. And so if instead focus on them, like here's our 30, 60, 90, 180 plan of how we're going to impact things and the metrics we're going to hit, then that's much more realistic. And you've got to have a strategy to do that. So to give an example, we had one group, they had, some major things they needed to improve. They just started with 25 guides in their knowledge operations system. And those 25 guides, because they were targeting the biggest problem cases, had a huge impact. They're able to then go back in and fill in other things to address other situations, but they focused on what was going to drive the most value immediately.
And it really boosts your employee engagement when you do it this way too, because the employees get behind the initiative.
Yep.
So how do you make the business case for the model and moving this upstairs to get the yes? So I want to talk about these workarounds and the labor dollars very specifically. So you pay an hourly rate for your agents, your SMEs, your tier 1 or tier 2 operators, your help desk. And then there's the burden. That's what the company pays. The Social Security, it's fixed. Workers' comp, it's a fixed rate. Vacation pay, holiday, and incentives are really up to the company. But you wrap all those up, and that is called the burden. And that burden is usually 17 to 25% above the hourly rate. And why is there a variance? Because BPOs pay different than internal brands sometimes. More companies are more generous. It really depends on what your company is. And if you don't have it in your P&L, your controller, your CFO is going to have that information. So I'm going to give you some numbers. I'm going to be very conservative. These are organizational assumptions for the numbers I'm going to give you. 15 agents to 1 team leader, could be more or less in your organization. A half a FTE SME per team. A third of an FTE QA per team, meaning 1 QA per 3 teams, and an ops manager for 1,000 agents. Now, this doesn't count for people being sick and calling in or coming in late or vacations, but this is very conservative on these numbers. I'm going to assume that we're going to take the lowest burden, that you're not paying 25 or more %, and that agents, SMEs, help desk, support desk are all paid the same. And in most contact centers, that's really not true, but we want to keep this really realistic. If you're paying $18 an hour to that frontline person or that SME or support desk with that 17% burden, your company is actually paying $43,000 a year for that person. If you're paying $20 an hour, that company is paying $48,000 with the burden, $22 an hour, $53,000 with the burden. And if you're paying $25 an hour for your agent or your SME to help, them find the answers, the agents find the answers, you're paying $61,000 for that one person. Then I assume that a TL makes $50,000, that first line supervisor annually. That's the number, $58,000 with the burden. And then the ops manager to manage these people is $65,000. Again, yours might be less, maybe more. With the burden on $65,000, $76,050 for the total burden. So that'll give you an idea at what your rates are. And this is a very, very conservative estimate. Now, I'm going to run these numbers. I'm going to use the $18 an hour for the agent, the SME, the support desk, the tier 2, and a 17% burden, which was on the bottom part of that burden chart that I showed you. If I was running this as a CX leader and I had 100 agents, I would just use 3 SMEs. I don't think they need a TL or QA or an ops manager. I'd put them underneath a really good TL. Those 3 SMEs are costing you over $131,000 a year to help an agent find answers because they're not readily available and they can't find them. If you have 300 people in your contact center, if this was me, I'd have 10 SMEs and a team leader. I would put them underneath a really good ops manager. I would have the team leader do the QA of the SMEs. And that's costing almost $500,000 because agents cannot find the answer or the process in seconds. If there's 500 agents, I would put 17 SMEs and a really good team leader. I wouldn't put any added QA. You might even have auto QA, but I would put that team underneath a really good ops manager, and I wouldn't pay the payroll for QA or ops on this scenario. I'm a pretty scrappy CX leader, but that team costs over $800,000 to support 500 agents who need help finding the answer for their customers or the process. And if it's 1,000 people, that's when I put some meat behind it as a CX leader, an ops manager, 12 QAs, 2 experienced team leaders, and 34 SMEs. That costs over $2 million to help those 1,000 agents try to find the answer at conversational speed. Now, what does it actually cost to have one of these systems put into your knowledge operations and it's powered by AI? What is the actual ROI? So the licenses, it's usually on a SaaS agreement. The licenses are between $8 a month per agent up to $35 per agent. Please make no mistake about this. Just because if you get the highest, the $35 per month, I would tell you that's not the best system out there. I can tell you from experience, but it will be anywhere between $8 to $35 per month per license. So for 100 SMEs, 3 SMEs for supporting 100 agents, that SME cost of $131,000 annually, the licenses would cost $10,000 to $47,000. If you paid that $35, it'd be $47,000 a year for the licenses because you do not need the SME team anymore. If you're supporting 3 agents, and that's a pretty scrappy SME team, that's a $500,000 annual expense. You don't need that anymore. Your licenses would be anywhere from $31,000 to $138,000 for those knowledge management annual licenses, depending on what company you pick. Supporting 500 agents, 17 SMEs, and a team leader, $800,000 cost. You get rid of the SME team. You don't need it. $52,000 to $229,000 on the high side for those annual licenses. And for supporting 1,000 agents, and it's costing you over $2 million a year, you do not need that team. And your licenses will be anywhere from $100,000 to almost $500,000 a year. The cost, ladies and gentlemen, the ROI on this is staggering. And these are very conservative numbers. Most systems aren't at the $35 a month per license. They're more toward the middle and the lower part of this.
Well, and Vicki, and as you've drawn this out, like it doesn't, this is a great way to look at it because it's very clear, it's very simple, but there's all these ancillary effects that happen as well where you're going to get cost savings even beyond this. But this is a really clear way to paint the picture for the executive team.
Yeah, this is just great to your point. This is just for the SME team or tier 2 or the support desk. Here are some other cost savings that Greg was talking about. Reduced escalations, obviously, but no transfer. Some organizations don't have to transfer to another department. Because you're looking for the answer and not just have to memorize everything inside these knowledge management systems, you may be able to combine departments. It reduces AHT. I'm sure every customer's heard this. May I put you on hold while I research that for just a minute or two? Well, you can find the answer or the process in seconds. Faster speed to competency for brand new agents because they're not memorizing everything. Your total methodology for your training takes on a whole different level. You're teaching them where to go to get the information. And first call resolution, less callbacks. The customer gets the answer because everybody's on the same page, no matter if it's a new person or an experienced person. And then reducing new hire training times. This happens all the time. This is a regular thing that we see with knowledge management systems. And Greg has seen this many, many times inside his customer base. 3 weeks down to 1 week, you're saving $33,000 for the agents and the trainer cost for a class of 20. But Greg's organization is his customers. Some of them have seen 12 weeks to 3 weeks. I mean, it's staggering because you're training them to go to the answer. It doesn't matter what the answer is. You're training them to go to that place. And then reducing HT. This is a real live example here. 8-minute HT reduced by 1 minute for 450 agents. That was an additional $850,000 of savings annually on top of moving the support team or the SME team out. And we could talk about this screen for hours about all the savings and the examples, but these are normal. These are not exceptions to the rule.
Yeah, I'll just share like this one's got some pretty extreme examples, but I'll share, just from a client who made this change, right? If you look at time to proficiency, so time till they could really work on their own without having to turn to supervisors, it was taking 12 months. And some people who aren't that close to the problem say, oh, that sounds like a long time. Tons of contact centers, this is the case. I hire 6, 12, 18, 24 months before they really hit independence. They reduced it from 12 months down to 8 to 10 weeks. That's massive. I mean, almost 10 months shaved off the time there. 16 weeks of training time before they could actually start making an impact, 4 months, taking that down to 3 weeks. They had 80% escalations before. That's all the way down to 10%. And I mean, it's just a massive change when, the agents are coming in and they can handle 90% of the things without having to escalate to someone. And then retention, their 1-year retention went from 17% up to 83% because knowledge was so much easier to find. People were more confident. They were more independent. They were contributing much more quickly versus having to sit there and feel like, I don't know what I'm doing for 12 months. So some real world impact of some examples here.
Yeah, it really is impactful for the organization.
Now, if you look at this, that Vicki showed you that slide before when you're making this case, poor knowledge operations is really the root cause of the majority of challenges in the contact center. Like people will focus in on all these different stats and ways they're going to handle it, but ultimately it comes down to poor knowledge operations. When you've got everybody's asking questions, it's going to impact every metric inside the organization. So when you solve that, you can improve just about every metric in the organization.
Yeah, I've never seen a KPI that is employer customer facing that hasn't been positively impacted by having a knowledge operation inside their contact center.
So hopefully this has been useful. I'm sure there are a couple of questions, but please submit those. We're happy to stay around as long as we need to answer questions people have about how you build this business case and get this prioritized in your organization.
Awesome. Yeah. We had a couple of questions come in and we'll just let some other people pop some in. Vicki, I think on your next slide, we had some contact information for you and Greg. As people type those in, we'll let this sink in. Reach out to Vicki if you would like an assessment and help building the business case for your knowledge management system. Vicki, those numbers were amazing. I'm sure everybody is eager to get their numbers to you and figure out exactly what that looks like. And then reach out to Greg if you have any questions about the Knowledge Ops platform or the Find and Follow framework. Awesome. Well, with that, I'll pop over to some questions. We had a few about implementation and timeline to launch. And so I'll leave that kind of open-ended to answer both of those. But I think people are concerned about how long it takes and the work it takes to do that. So what do you guys typically see for a timeline? And then I'll add to the question a little bit. How long, Vicki, does it normally take once you start this process to start to realize that ROI that you were showing a couple slides ago?
Okay, you want me to jump in, Greg, or do you want to handle?
Yeah, share from your experience. I mean, you've got a broader experience, obviously. I know our customer base, and you've worked with people across, that have used multiple systems. So I can tell you from our thing, what we see is sometimes there's a mistake made of they want it to be too complete before they launch. They want perfection, and that will delay it. And we say, let's make progress. So let's start solving problems right away. And like we showed in that slide, identify 25 things. So if you do that, you can launch within 30 to 60 days and start seeing impact right away. And then it frees up so much time, it's easier to go in and backfill other things there. That's what we recommend is taking that approach. But Vicki, I'd be interested to hear what you've seen.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with you. Those quick wins help the employee engagement. It helps you can talk about that upstairs to the executive team. Everyone's behind your process a lot more. So I would say, for some of our clients, it's 2 months. They're up and launched with a lot of it, and up to 6 months to get it totally. It's never complete, right, Greg? You're
Yep.
constantly adding because your business is evolving. And I would say this: companies need some type of a system like this, because if they don't have it, they're going to be left behind. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have to be able to keep up with your competitors. Customers are they're struggling right now. They want their answer now, and they want it the way they want it, whatever channel they want it. So I would say your assessment, and we're seeing the same thing in the field.
Great.
Awesome. Great. Well, next up we have, this is a good one. These stats were helpful. Vicki mentioned that the numbers are dependent on the solution you pick. Any tips on choosing a software that aligns with your goals? Any green flags or red flags to be aware of?
I'll jump in here because we work with a lot of different companies, and ScreenSteps is one of our partners. We love working with them. I would say that. Repeat the last part, would you, John? Just to make sure I'm.
Yeah. Any green flags or red flags to be aware of when vetting these providers?
So there's 2 ways you can look at this. One is a standalone, like a ScreenSteps. That's their core competency. It's all that they do, their knowledge, or subject matter experts. And then you've got the knowledge modules that are sort of hooked on to a CRM or a telephony system. That's not their core competency. So what I would say is, what does your organization need? Is it more process driven, more answer driven? Where's your pain? And really, it's assessing the whole thing to be able to pick the right system. And we love working with ScreenSteps.
Yeah, and I would just add there, ScreenSteps isn't the right thing for everyone. I think what you need to assess is, what are your needs? And if you are mainly dealing with factual information, anything that has search and information in it will probably work if I'm just giving answers to facts. If you've got more process troubleshooting, if you're increase the level of complexity or you're dealing with high levels of change, then you need to make sure that the system you're using is more robust. You'll have some knowledge management systems that are basically a content management system, and that can work fine if that's what you need. But if your needs lean more towards complexity and change and troubleshooting, then you may need something that is more robust there. So you want to be real clear on what is it you need agents to be able to do. And don't just assume just because we wrote it down, they're going to be able to do that. It has to, like we say, be findable, followable, scannable based on your procedures and the tasks they have to perform.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Greg, one more step is the reporting is really important. Some systems have really robust reporting, so you really can sort of paint a picture of what's going on inside your organizations. And others just say, hey, that was pulled up 4,321 times, which really doesn't help you. So
Mhm.
looking at that, if reporting is really important to you and that's being driven by the executive team, then you want to make sure that you can find a system to do that, or you'll need to, get another piece of software to do that for you.
Awesome. Great. Well, we have two more so far. They're trickling in. Um, you mentioned the idea of a knowledge champion. How do you decide which employees can fill that role? Is it separate from your FTEs? Is it an additional cost salary?
Really, you've already got this person on your team. They're the person that's always fixing mistakes. They're the person that can't go on vacation because if they leave, nobody knows what to do. It's really just we're taking that person that's already on your team and we're making them more leveraged. We're going to make it their impact much greater because they're going to be capturing things that people can find and follow on their own. So that ideal knowledge champion is that person that everybody's turning to right now. It's just we want to repurpose their efforts.
And how you do that is, again, the old organizational structures inside of contact centers for operations are not the same. It's evolved. So it's about being creative and reallocating people to be that knowledge champion. They're also super detail oriented. I mean, they like to color code the spreadsheets. Those
Yeah.
those are people that people gravitate toward. But massaging your organizational structure is key to be able to do that. That person's already there.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I think the title of knowledge champion and the whole idea around it is so empowering too that when you decide on that person, it's easy to get excited about that and feel really eager to get this going. Okay, we have one more. Beside the costs you provided, is there anything else you would recommend including in your business case?
I know from our side, like,
Oh,
sometimes there is implementation costs, like you may need an outside coach or someone to assist in making sure you're applying a strategy that's been proven to work that's going to match your organization. So you're going to have the software costs, you're going to, that. So, but you also want to factor in those implementation costs if you need outside assistance.
yeah, most companies will have an implementation team for you. And sometimes they'll also bring in, a company will also bring in, to Greg's point, somebody else to sort of help that's done this before. But that's not an ongoing cost.
Yeah,
And it
Great.
that's
depends on
really
the
it.
size of the organization, right, Greg, what you would
Yeah.
charge for implementation. It's not an
Right.
arm and a leg. It really is very affordable.
Yeah. Yeah, and just so you know, like the implementations that we do, they will range anywhere from one-time fees of $5,000 to $40,000, depending upon the size and scope of what that is. So, it's that gives you a sense of what that might be. I can't speak to other organizations.
Yeah, and when you're proving your business case, you tack that, 10,000 to 40,000, whatever that has been quoted to you. You just tack that on to your ROI against the licenses, against all your workarounds that you're doing.
Yeah.
This impacts your CSATs as well, your repeat business. It affects every KPI when you have a system in your operations like this.
Well, we had one, talking to that, we had one group that they ended up saving $2.5 million, and it wasn't headcount, it wasn't reduced training time. It was they now had consistency on troubleshooting a particular problem that was causing product to be returned, expensive product to be returned mistakenly. But now everybody was troubleshooting it the same way. They were able to optimize that so they could troubleshoot more effectively, and they decreased those returns that didn't need to happen. Customers much more happy. They don't have to go through a return process. They've got something that's working, and it saved them $2.5 million. So you're going to make that initial business case, and then after you do this, you're going to find all these other benefits that will happen that are significant.
I think documenting the case studies is important, Greg, because it just helps a CX leader be able to drive other changes in their organization because they have a
Yeah,
proven track record of being able to implement something with success and having such an impact on the organization.
exactly. Yeah.
Well,
All right.
great. That looks like all we have.
Well, thank you, Vicki, for coming on and talking with us and our audience here. We'll be sending out a recording of this to all those who registered. And like we said, if you have any questions, reach out to Vicki or me. We're both pretty active on LinkedIn as well. Happy to help out.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks, everybody.